Good afternoon na po mga beloved students sa Biology Department of Cebu Normal University. And I'm glad that you have or you have joined me sa ako ang sa kining lecture na to karong kahaponon. Okay? So welcome you all again sa ato ang third lecture sa third topic na to sa ato ang class sa evolutionary biology. So I hope you are all well, and at the same time we are hoping for better nga society in terms sa kaning ato ang ginatubag ron nga pandemic. So hoping tuloy-tuloy na ni ato ang pag-decline sa ato ang mga cases dinhi sa ato ang nasod, or not just din sa ato nasod pero sa entire planet. Okay, so kana siya. So relax, enjoy learning. Okay, so kana siya. Okay, so let's begin our topic number 3. So we are now in topic number 3, and it is entitled Arguments for Evolution. So when you say katong sa topic number 2 na to, we discussed there the different mechanisms sa kanang gitawag tog evolution, di ba? So katong natural selection, genetic drift, sa ganito, katong Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, and among others. Okay, so karon we are going to discuss katong mga arguments for evolution. So we are going to evaluate what are some of these arguments nga niingon sila nga makasupport sa theory of evolution. Okay, so shall we begin? Okay, so nata din he. Okay, so arguments for evolution. Okay, so din hita. Okay, so in topic 2 we discussed the different mechanisms that drive evolutionary events. We learned that for evolution to take place, an organism will rely heavily on genetic mutations where newer information must be added to its already existing genetic resources for the expression of genes that will produce novel characteristics in response to the environment. In this topic, we will discuss some of the major arguments that are considered to favor evolution. So, I think it's a basic knowledge nga kana bitawng we already know nga at some point sa history sa natural world, some random molecules bumped each other, and then until they formed the first primitive cell, which became the ancestor of all living organisms. Okay, so throughout the course of time, so mo to nga it developed kanang gitawag nato nga mga different character traits. Okay, so based on the principles sa katong adaptation nga through adaptation, each of these or some of these cells develop their unique traits kana siya. Okay, so take note also nga sa genetics, in terms of genetics, all living organisms possess sa kanang gitawag nato nga genetic material, either DNA or RNA. So we know nga this genetic material is the blueprint of every organism. So meaning to say, when you say blueprint, kung unsa ang naa sa genotype, okay, dinha ma-determine kung unsa ang ihang phenotype. Okay, so kana siya. So meaning to say, ang kanidi ang pag-develop sa different characters o sa ka-organism is dependent on the amount or the quantity of genetic information inside an organism. So kung ingon ta nga smaller nga mga organisms, so naamo na siya set of genes or set of genetic material nga naka-contain ana niya nga ana iyang size and ana iyang color, so on and so forth. Okay, on the other hand, if we are going to consider nga dagko bitaw kayo og jump, di ba kay we discuss micro and macro evolution. So kung moingon na kita og dagko kay nga jump from one taxon to another, di ba? So it needs massive amount of information. So imagine lang ni siya nga a simple cell, okay, most likely containing in terms of evolution if evolution is actually correct. So naay gamay kay nga cell. So ang iya pong genetic material is gamay po kaayo, di ba? Kay mo compensate man na siya. Okay? So fast forward pila ka billions of years, here comes a complicated animal, say for example an elephant. So if you are going to compare the elephant's genetic content and those the primitive or the first cells, ikato iyang genetic content, you can see that there is this large discrepancy in terms of the amount of information, in terms of the genetic material nga naka-define kung unsa to siya nga organism. So basically what happened there throughout the course of history from the simple cell to the elephant that I mentioned a while ago is that there is this additional genetic material, because you cannot say nga ang katong genetic material from coming from the primitive cell is maura gid gihapon to siya nga genetic material that made the body plan of an elephant, di ba? So hinana siya. So basically naa siya mga additional, okay, naa siya mga additional nga information. Okay, so mao na ato ang kuanon karon. So let's begin with this one. So kanang gitawag nato Lamarckism. So John Baptiste Lamarck, okay, as popularized by the French Lamarckism, as popularized by the French naturalist Jean Baptiste Lamarck, is a form of evolutionary theory. So ang kanang Lamarckism, this is actually a prior version of kanang gitawag natog evolution. Okay, so independent ni siya sa kang Darwin. Okay, so before Darwin na ay widespread ang kaning kang John Baptiste Lamarck nga version. So this version of evolution states that characters that were developed due to frequent use will develop further into newer structures, and that these structures will be passed on to the next generation. So ang di ba kakuan man ta nga kung kanabitong the theory of use and disuse. So according to Lamarck nga the more ginagamit ni siya nga character sa usa ka organism, okay, ang kaning gi-adapt niya nga character, okay, kaning gi-adapt niya nga character sa usa ka organism can be passed on to the next generation. So if ang sa evolution ng good is kanang incremental steps ba, ginagmay. So kung ginagmayo na nimo kana nga mga changes in response to the environment kay adaptation na siya, it can be passed on to the next generation, and na tendency that this next generation is masolidify yun na niya nga character nga it's no longer an adaptive one, but it's already an integral part of the particularly the morphology of the organism. Okay, so in other words, Lamarckism proposes that the structures that were not frequently used will ultimately lose its functions, while a more improved structure will be evident if frequently used. So mani akong gi-mention ganiha katong theory of use and disuse. Okay, so if an organism doesn't use that much ang kanang isa ka character, then it will be lost through time. And on the other hand, if ang kaning siya nga character trait is sige ginagamit, it will improve further and further as it's being passed from one generation to another. Okay, so that's Lamarckism. So one of the famous Lamarckism example is when giraffes stretch its heads to reach for leaves in trees when eating. Okay, so kana siya. So take a look at this one. So mao ni ang sa kanang Lamarckism. Okay, so according to the version of evolution, okay, giraffes have before the ancestor giraffe have shorter necks. Okay, so na siya shorter necks, and ang katong tree nga na siya specific nga tree ginakaon is nagkataas pod. So what happened as an adaptive nga mechanism so that this giraffe can survive, iya pong gi-stretch ang neck over time hangtod nagsigig stretch hangtod nga we have now this giraffe that are they are long-necked nga creatures. So however, so man ang kang Lamarck nga version. Okay, so however in the 1930s, Lamarck's version has been abandoned since it cannot be observed. For example, a muscleman, violinist, athlete, and artist do not have guarantee to have children that can automatically inherit their skills even at the succeeding generation. So, 1930s pa lang di ay gi-abandon na ni sayang Lamarckian version. Kaya nga naman ang contention ana nga say for example na ay bodybuilder, di ba? Na ay bodybuilder, iyang mama bodybuilder, iyang papa iyang bodybuilder, iyang lolo bodybuilder, silang tanan. They are family of bodybuilders, both mother side and father side. So, why is it nga di nato na makita sa kanang mga anak sa mga newer generation nga dagko na sila muscles, di ba? So, because if Lamarckian nga principle is true, then at least ang kanang mga baby siguro mga 10 generations after sa katong 10 generations in the making should have bulkier nga muscles when they were born. Okay, but that is not the case. So with sa kanang gitawag natong mga musicians, so with the skills, everything, say for example katong sa katong sa musician, so why is it that it's not a guarantee nga ang inyong mga, if you are a musician, a good violinist or pianist or a singer, why is it that it's not a guarantee that your offspring will be great musicians? Why is it that they still have to learn how to play this music or how to sing kana siya? So basically mao na nga dili na kaayo kasaligan ang version ni Lamarck in terms sa kaning origin of species. Okay, so hence Lamarckism describes the automatic transfer of developed traits to the succeeding generations due to use and disuse, while Darwinism is the development in traits due to the accumulated hereditary variation in genes. So mas klaro ang definition ni Darwin compared to Lamarck. Kay ang Lamarck magod kay dapat ma-observe na siya. Okay, so ma-observe na siya. But according to Darwin, iyang gi-refine lang ba? Ang kang Darwin is iyang gi-refine kung unsay argument ni Lamarck. Though mao gyapon na kang Darwin nga mapass ang usa ka trait from one generation to the other. Okay? So ang kang Darwin lang is kanang gi-define niya nga incremental ang iyang steps. Okay, incremental ang iyang steps sa kanang gitawag natong variation sa genes. So the genes have something to do with the changes in an organism as it moves through time. Okay, so hinana siya. So in the succeeding sections, we will discuss some of the accepted supporting arguments for evolution. So that's just a backgrounder. Kay basin makuanta sa kang Lamarck ug sa kang Darwin. So that makes katong version ni Darwin on the origin of life, that makes him as the main proponent sa kanang gina-accept karon. So kana siya nga version kang Charles Darwin. That made him a celebrity. Actually, Darwin became a celebrity when he published his book. Okay, so kana siya. So Darwin's name, rockstar siya sa scientific community when right after he published his first book. Okay, so first here, though you can actually search for other nga mga supports. First here, there is this what we call the homology. So homology refers to the similarities of structure and functions within different organisms due to common ancestry. So as what I have mentioned sa atong orientation or even sa katong previous na to nga mga lectures nga ang kaning gitawag natong systematic biology and evolution, they are closely related because when you say systematic biology, it is the study of the relationship of organisms based on similarities and dissimilarities. Okay, so here comes now homology. Mao na nga ang homology is now focusing on the similarities of an organism. So the more similar ang sa homology is the more similar ang ilahang character traits, the closer they are nga related, the more related they are. Okay, so mao nang sa homology. So magkadako gani ang discrepancies sa differences sa ilahang mga characters, so magkalayo pod ang ilahang relatedness. So that is why when you say birds and reptiles, so they are closer than birds are closer to reptiles than they are closer to mammals. Okay, so hinana siya. So that's how homology works. So this means that the commonality of structures, commonality of structures and functions is due to the retention of some genetic resources that were passed down from ancestor to offspring. Okay? So mo nang gitawag natog homologous structure. So homologous structure, say for example, ang kanang hand na lima ka fingers ang hand nato. Okay, so kung adto po ka sa kanang mga other mammals na po lima ka fingers ang ilang hand. So that's homology. Okay, so kung ang lima ka finger, if ang organism sa is naay lima ka fingers ang ilang hand, okay, duha ka organism, so mas closely related sila kaysa katong usa ka organism nga upat lang ilang hand. If upat lang ka fingers sa ilang hand. Okay, so I think you get what I mean. So analogous structures, this is now the opposite of homologous structures. Ang kanang gitawag nato analogous, because in contrast with homologous structures, since it refers to the similarity in structures and functions that do not have common ancestors. So walay common ancestors, diba? Remember sa katong divergent and convergent evolution katong gi-discuss nato sa lecture 2. So ang divergent evolution, they come from the same ancestor pero over time is na ay mga adaptive characters nga na-develop. Okay, so mao to nga they are different species but coming from the same ancestor. That's why their similarity is high. Okay, compared to the convergent evolution, they come from different ancestors but they develop similar nga character, but they come from different ancestors. So mao nang gitawag natong analogous. Okay, so British naturalist Richard Owens was the first to describe homology and analogy. So it's Richard Owens. The most common example of homologous structures, sa kani vertebrate forelimbs. So this is the most common, and later on I will be showing some images. Okay, so across different vertebrates, components of the forelimbs, say for example carpals, metacarpals, phalanges, ulna, and radius are found. Only that each vertebrate or vertebral species had modified such structure, presumably in response to the environment. So as the supposed ancestor transitioned from water to land, genes were modified in response to the environmental parameters, mainly random mutation. Then modified genes were passed down to the successor genes. So, however, the inherited genes are still subject for modification with respect to the conditions of nature. So, mao na nga over and over again, it will always nature ang gitawag natog mag-determine kung unsa ang kanang gitawag nato nga types of organisms ang mo survive, di ba? So mo na gitawag natong mo na principle sa natural selection. So it can be the two distinct groups independently modify their body structures it achieving functions. So mo na gitawag natong analogous. Okay, so kani siya. So let's go to this kanang gitawag natong figure. So this is now kaning gitawag natong limbs, di ba, sa vertebral sa among selected vertebrates. So naka-human, lizard, siya 5, ang iyahang cat na 5 ka, phalanges, whale 5, bats 5, frog 5, birds okay, 3 na ang birds. Okay, so makita nato din nga naa siya similarity. Okay, though it's not 100% the same. Okay, kaya kung 100% the same na siya, say for example, hinani iyang structure, then that's still human, di ba? So, hinana siya, so that's similarity. Okay, so what else? Other structures. So, number 1 ana is kining gitawag natong limbs. Okay, ang number 2 ang vertebral column, di ba? Ang skull. Okay, so those are actually the basis on the study of homology. Okay, so sa karon kana sa neo-Darwinism nga component, it's already the homology between genes. Okay, so remember nga natay gitawag nga molecular systematics. Okay, so okay, so din hinata, so we are done with homology. So again, so homology is that the closer nga resemblance sa ilahang structures, ilahang morphology, okay, the more sila nga related sa usag-usa. So that's the principle there. Okay, so the second here is ontogeny. So ontogeny is the discipline that studies the embryonic development of an organism. Okay, so ang nagkuha ni is si Ernst Haeckel. So according to Ernst Haeckel, ancestral characters are thought to persist in the early stages of embryonic development where similarities across embryos of different species can be observed. Hence, it can infer evolutionary relationships among different groups. A common example for ontogeny as evolutionary basis is the presence of slits between embryos of humans, chickens, and fishes. And evolutionists then infer that such embryonic structures are remnants of a common ancestor. So, mao na ilahan po ning kanang gitawag natog gihimo nga proof of the occurrence of evolution. So kani siya. So take a look at this one: fish, salamander, turtle, you have chicken, rabbit, and humans. So ang isa sa ilang giwan is kaning slit. Okay, kaning slit nga found in these different embryos. Okay, so mo na ingon sa Ernst Haeckel. By the way, Ernst Haeckel is the first one of the first nga students nga nidawat ni Darwin. Okay, ni-embrace ni Darwin. So siya siguro ang pinaka-excited sa among the naturalists, among the scientists during the time of Darwin nga nalipay nga nigawas ang origin of species. Because after that, a few years, siguro mga 5 years after gipublish ang Origin of Species, nagpagawas din sa Ernst Haeckel ang iyahang analysis sa embryo as one of the basis for the process of evolution. Okay, so muna siyang gitawag natog ontogeny. Then third here is we have the vestigial organs. So another point for evolution is the presence of vestigial organs. So vestigial organs refer to ancestral structures that were morphologically and physiologically been reduced. Okay, so vestigial organs can be compared among closely related groups. Okay, so ang example na is the coccyx of humans. So basically ang kaning vestigial organs, di ba katong gimension nato ganiha the katong theory of use and disuse. Okay, so even though nga ang kang Lamarck has been dismissed, but there are also areas sa iyahang explanation that remains even until today. Okay, so say for example kaning vestigial organs. Okay, ang vestigial organs is wala naman ni siya na gamit. Okay, mao to nga wala na, di ba? Kung the less nimo na gigamit ang isa ka imong body structure, so the more na siya nga mo retrieve or mo retreat, not retrieve, the more siya nga mo retreat. Okay, magkawala ang iyang function. So mao po na ginatan-aw sa evolutionist. Okay, kanang gitawag natong vestigial organs. So one of the perfect example na is the coccyx of humans. Okay, so coccyx of humans were thought to be vestigial in nature since some primates that were related to humans retained their tailbone. So mao ning gitawag tailbone kaning coccyx here. Okay, sa sacrum. Okay, so tailbone siya. So according to evolutionists, nga kini siya is a remnant of the tailbone kay sa unang panahon ang mga tao na ay ikog. Okay, just like sa kanang mga monkeys. Okay, because apes do not have kanang gitawag natong don't have tails. Okay, so katong mga monkeys is na ay mga tail. So mao na ilaha kay ginagamit pa Manila og kanang katkat. Okay, so kung siguro ang tao siguro is wala mo undang og katkat og kahoy, siguro na retain pa siguro niya. That is if evolution is correct. Okay, so that's how I see it. Okay, so other vestigial structures include the hind leg bones of whales, okay, and the underdeveloped legs among snakes. Okay, this is actually quite interesting kaning sa mga snakes. Okay, so once in a while na ay makita sa nature nga ang snakes is na ay legs, di ba? So a couple of times makadungog ko sa news nga kanang mga tao ba matingala nga na ang ilang nadakpan is nga bitin is na ay legs. So mo to nga matingala sila, pero mo ni explanation nga some snakes nga sa ilang genes is ilahang na express ang genes for the development of legs. Okay, so basically ang kanang mga snakes is naana sila yung mga legs before. Okay, so that's vestigial organs. So accordingly kani po daw kidney sa humans is also a vestigial organ. Okay, so kini nibalik na po ang adaptation. So we know that adaptation is there for ang iyang sole purpose is to help the organism survive a changing environment, because if an organism doesn't adapt, okay, sa changing environment, it will likely nga dili siya mo survive that much. Okay, so again ang adaptation is survival mode of an organism. So as mentioned in topic 2, natural selection is closely knitted with adaptation. Adaptation takes place when organisms produce structures and functions to best fit with their environment. Okay, so napo yung concept sa survival of the fittest. So only those who are fitted for the environment mao ra na makasurvive. So ang ako ang analogy ani is kana bitong parehas na sa kanang mga classmates, di ba? So sa usa ka class na magyunay mga barkada-barkada, even sa inyong section gani na mga barkada-barkada. Okay, so kung kinsa tong pare-parehas og kanang trip, mao gyud toy magtapok. So pananglitan nay usa ka group nga hashtag yung yaga-yagaon na, di ba? Kanang mga below the belt bitaw nga mga jokes, okay? And then para sa ilaha is normal lang yun nang mag-jokes. Nga kanang sakit o sahay sakit kaayo, normal yun naanad na sila, they are adapted to that type of jokes. And here comes ikaw nga ganahan makigbarkada nila, nya sensitive kay ka, hilomon kay ka, and then sensitive kay ka sa mga joke, nga dali kapayason kaayo ka, and then kung mag-join ka sa ilaha, kinsa may mag-adjust, ikaw or sila. So hinana na siya. So if dili gani ka mo adjust sa ilahang pagkakuan kanang ilahang below the belt nga jokes, then you won't last siguro a month or a week nga mag-uban sa ilaha. So mao na nga it's either you adapt or you get eliminated. Okay? So that's actually the survival of the fittest. Okay? So that's adaptation. Okay, so prior to Wallace and Darwin, the idea of adaptation was already in existence, but they were the ones to convincingly connect adaptation to natural selection. So later on, we are going to talk about Wallace. Okay, we are going. I think nakadiscuss man tani sa ato ang systematics, di ba? Si Alfred Russel Wallace sa iyang contribution. So kung nakalimot mo, remember that Alfred Russel Wallace, siya ang independently developed the theory of natural selection aside from Darwin. Okay, and then the entertaining thing about Wallace and Darwin is that Wallace and Darwin did this observation at a similar time. The same gina sila, they don't know each other. Actually, they don't know each other, but they developed the same similar theory. Okay, so kana siya. So mato nga prior to Wallace and Darwin, the idea of adaptation was already in existence, pero sila rang duha ang naka-convince nga ang adaptation and natural selection are both connected. Okay, so both Wallace and Darwin strongly and successfully argued that among the same species, only those members that can exhibit adaptation that fits within the environment will propagate. Okay, so kana siya. So the well-adapted nga kaning organism, okay, maura na siya makapuyo sa usa ka environment, and of course na siya reproductive success. Okay, so adaptation can also be understood with derived and primitive traits. So naputay kating, I don't know if you can still remember this derived katong sa atong systematics. Okay, so derived traits, also known as apomorphy, are those that are modified over the years. For instance, the different structure of forelimbs among vertebrates as mentioned earlier. So man gitawag natong derived. So meaning to say there are already modifications. Okay, from one evolutionary event to the next, or from one evolutionary step to the next, na nagmodify hangtod nga kung i-compare nimo ang existing nga kaning gitawag nato nga species, and i-compare nimo sa ancestral nga species, naa na siya kaning difference, okay, because it has been modified over the years. So man gitawag nato derived traits. On the other hand, ang primitive traits, also known as plesiomorphy, are characters that were slightly modified over evolution timeline. So meaning to say, ang primitive traits, wala sa ingon nga wala ma-modify, but their modification is slower compared to the derived nga mga traits. Okay, so mao na ang primitive. That is why kanang ang kini nga mga traits murag odd looking, murag alien looking, kasagaran kung mo kuanta sa nature ang ilahang gidudahan nga derived or kaning primitive traits, mura ni siya og kaning mga weird nga alien-like nga mga modifications or alien-like nga mga traits. So note that a character can be decided whether note that a character can be decided whether it is primitive or derived if compared with other structure or similar functions. Examples of the size of human brain must be compared with other animals to know whether it is primitive or derived. So you cannot determine whether that character is derived or primitive not unless you compare. Okay? So say for example, among apes, i-compare ang physiology or the anatomy of the brain or other structures. So di na mo makita kung kinsa ang or ma-determine kung kinsa ang unsa nga brain ang derived, unsa ang kanang gitawag natong primitive. Okay? Kana siya. So simpliciomorphy, so napod kay gitawag simpliciomorphy is referring to shared primitive traits, while synapomorphy refers to shared derived traits. Okay, so napon na kanang gitawag natong sharing of traits, meaning to say ang duha ka groups of different species. Okay, so makita ba ni siya nga traits, the same ba ni siya nga traits, okay, or kaning sa simpliciomorphy or synapomorphy na derive ba ni siya nga traits. Okay, so hence if an organism's traits perfectly match with that of the environment or its existing traits help it survive, then there is no use for it to modify its existing traits. Okay, so mo na nga ang kaning gitawag natong characters nga na modify based ra gyud gihapon na balik ra gihapon ta sa katong environment. Okay, kay kung ni match ra ang iyahang character traits sa iyang environment, then why modify? Diba? So mo ni ilang giingon nga do not fix those that are not broken. Okay, so do not fix those that are not broken. So hinana po na siya nga principle sa kanang gitawag nato nga adaptation. So crocodilians were few of the group of organisms that were thought to have least modified their structure. So crocodilians, kandiba natay kanang mga alligators, crocodiles, mga caimans. Okay, so mao na nga many considered these crocodiles as living dinosaurs. Mo to kung gi-mention ganiha nga the weirder, I don't know kung naam na siyang word. Naam siguro yung weirder. The weirder the traits, the more primitive it is. So mao nang mga crocodiles hadlo kay natanawon, di ba? Hadlo kay tinawon. So that's how they view it. Okay, so this is a cladogram. Show some of the derived and primitive characters. So say for example, ang jaws, di ba? Ang jaws sa shark, salamander, lizard, and tiger, gorilla, they were modified over time. But so mao nang gitawag nato sila nga derived character. Okay? So derived character sila, but kung tan-aw nato nga naa sila mga modifications over time compared sa katong ilang ancestor which can be found somewhere here. Okay, so ang lampreys, wa na siya ilabot sa jaws kay wala jawless man ni ang lamprey. Okay, so kana siya. So another here is speciation. So in nature, the same species can be distributed in various ecosystems through migration and geographic isolation. When some of its members settled in their respective ecosystems, chances are there will be difference in environmental parameters such as microclimate, food availability, presence of predators, and others. So, naay tendency nga even though nga lain-lain na siya og kanang climate, naay tendency pod nga naay kaning members of the same species occupying different climate type. So, for example, kani bitang gitawag nato og Eurasian tree sparrow. Okay, so Eurasian tree sparrow, kanang bitang brown nga langgam nga makita nato sa tuang pinaka-common nga brown nga langgam nga inyong makita nga kanang gagmay, kanang murag maya, pero dili na siya maya ha. So kanang basta kanang gagmay may pinaka-common. That is actually quite common in the Southeast Asian region or even dili sa Southeast Asia. Okay, say for example, ang kanang Eurasian tree sparrow, when I went to Hong Kong a couple of years ago, okay, nagtanatan ako dito katong sa ilahang Disneyland, kaya bitang dugay pa kay mga able. Sayo kami dito, dugay kay mga able. So nakita nako dito nga na Eurasian tree sparrow. Okay? So I thought nga it was only ang katong Eurasian tree sparrow, I thought yung iyang distribution is naara sa Southeast Asia. Okay? So I found sa Hong Kong, and then by the name itself Eurasian. So it's distributed over Europe and Asia. Okay? Eurasian tree sparrow. So mao na nga the same species pero they can be found in different climates. Okay? So hinana siya, but ang kaning gitawag natong speciation, what if wala pa speciation nga nahitabo, okay, but over the years ang katong naay mga gagmay-gagmay nga mga developments sa traits sa kaning Eurasian tree sparrow, especially nga naay shifting sa climate, even sa mga microclimate. So what if mo develop sila different ang usa ka population of this Eurasian tree sparrow, say for example dinha sa katong sa Hong Kong, which is much cooler compared din sa Pilipinas. What if they develop a new color, okay, sa ilahang feathers, or what if ilahang beak mausab, ilahang beak shape, what if their size they become either bigger or smaller. I mean hinana ba, so if these changes will occur, then that population nga katong ni-exhibit og mga changes, mao to nga they can be considered as a new species. Okay? Kay considering nga ang sa Pilipinas nga Eurasian tree sparrow is wala kaayo, iya lang gi-maintain ang iyahang mga characters. Okay? Kay there's no need, ma'am, tong dimension ganiha nga kung walay need nga mo change, dili mo change. So ang katong mag-change di ay mao ra to ang naay need. Okay, so that is actually speciation. Okay, so meaning to say, ang one species, and we have discussed this one sa ato ang systematic biology, ang one species di ay it can result to multiple speciation. So one species can result to 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 different species of different 20 different species, okay, exhibiting where individual species are now exhibiting distinct na mga characters. So, and as new population of the same species from various localities, they make adaptation in response to the demand of the respective environment. So, mali akong gi-mention hina. So, this is now known as speciation or the formation of species. And there are 3 types of speciation. Okay? So, we have the allopatric, when geological barriers separate or split a population of a species. It leads to isolation of individuals na kay parapatric and na kay sympatric. So parapatric is when a group of individuals of the same species migrate to a new niche or environment. Okay, and the sympatric when there are members who mutated or adapted even inside a population. So these changes can influence mating behavior among members. So this is speciation, mao ni akong gi-mention kaniha, and sa kanilang is finch. Mao ni ang katong Darwin. Di ba ang katong Darwin nga finches, while he was studying the flora and fauna of the Galapagos Island, he noticed that these finches have different beaks depending on the island where they can be found, and at the same time sa ilahang choice of food. Okay, so this is now the different speciation. Okay, so na kay allopatric. Okay, so allopatric is na kay population, and then na ay formation of barrier. Okay, so na ay barrier nga nahitabo. What happened is that ang kinisiya nga division, say for example sa kaning nasa inyong left, can no longer have the opportunity to mate with those that are in the right. Okay, kana may barrier. So later on, either of the side develop their uniqueness. Okay, develop og uniqueness, so mo nang isolated siya. That's why a new species can be evident. Okay, so mo na siya nga gitawag na siya og speciation. On the other hand, ang kaning parapatric, okay, no isolation was found. Okay, no isolation was found, but a few number, di ba? Remember sa katong ato ang founder effect, di ba? Katong sa topic number 2, founder effect nga ng migration nga nahitabo. So the parapatric is that na ay a portion of the population nga nagmigrate and then started a new colony. So na ay tendency nga this new colony will exhibit unique set of traits. Okay, so that's still speciation. And the last one here is the sympatric, when in a population, the starting population here, then there's a group of population nga naay gitawag nato nga mutation. Okay, so we know mutation can alter the genetic sequence, and at the same time, or as a result, it will also alter ang iyahang kanang gitawag nato nga um, expression, genetic expression. So if this genetic expression, and take note that it can be passed from one generation to the other. So if this genetic expression is managhan na siya din ha, okay, and then katong mga nag-exhibit og new traits, then it can actually form a new species. Okay, so that's the three types of speciation: allopatric, parapatric, and sympatric. So when members of one species start to migrate, they say in linear direction, they form their own population and start to show variation. Okay, so mana kong dimension na. Then you are to arbitrarily compare this linear migration to bend it to form a loop. Okay, so Okay, so to form a loop, the appearance of the original population, the last population, the line appear distinctly. The distinction becomes wide that even though they originally come from the same species, yet the tendency is that they would no longer mate and reproduce. This is known as ring species. This is still a speciation. So ring species is Canicia. Okay, so very common example come from salamander insatina species. Okay, so say for example here. Okay, so this is now the ring species, the illustration of a ring species. Okay, so na kay original population here. Okay, so mo yung original population dinhi nga part. Okay, na ay migration dinhi. Okay, remember sa kani the sympatric na ay migration towards the left, and then naa siya barrier din kaning lake, okay, to the left, and then naa po migration towards the right. Okay, and ang katong mga nag-migrate, napag sila migration nga mga nanghitabo. So, pananglitan, this is the first colony. So, ang first colony is, or kini siya bakaha. Okay, ang first colony, kini sila nga mga first nga colony is that nag-migrate sila, and then, pag abot nila din daw nag-mate sila, hangtod nga, nag-migrate na po migration, hangtod nga this variation, okay, symbolized by the differing colors here, okay, will result sa kani din. Now, on the other hand, kato siya sa right. What if sa left, naapoy migration nga nahitabo? So, they also exhibited due to the differences sa ilahang mga microclimate. Okay? So, they also exhibited their unique nga mga characteristics. Ni-develop sila due to the adaptive response sa ilahang differing environment. What happened now is that, take note here, okay? In Kinesia, kining red, and then kaning dark nga purple, or kaning purple, once they meet, okay, they no longer recognize, okay, so they no longer recognize each other, so meaning to say they are already different species. Okay, so mana nga makaingon ta nga a speciation takes place. Okay, remember sa katong gitawag natong systematic biology nga naay different biological species concept sa katong biospecies concept, where ang katong only those coming from the same nga kanang ma-recognize niya nga mauni nga parehas sila og kaning gitawag nato nga species, maora po to ilahang i-mate. Okay, so mo nang biological species concept. So in this case, since they fail to acknowledge that they are of the same species, therefore we can say that this is a ring species, and a speciation took place. Okay, so mo na siya. So this is what happened here sa Insantina species sa California. Okay, so you notice here, okay, so different species. Okay, so makita nato din here that there are already variations that took place, okay, as new colonies move from one location to the other. Okay, so kaning Orogonensis and Platensis, okay, so you can see their contrast, and most likely is they want to recognize each other being members of the same species, so they will not mate. Okay, kana siya. Bisag unsaon na tog pasabot nga gikan na sila sa the same species, di gyud na sila motoo. Okay? Kana siya. So adaptive radiation. Okay, so adaptive radiation is defined as the rapid evolution of a species, and when we say rapid, this means that speciation takes place in a relatively short period of time. Okay, so ang kuan man gud ng kanang gitawag tong uban man gud is kana bitang giingon nga evolution takes kana bitang makita ra nato nga katong at katong duha lang ka branch ang maumogan po na kasagaran nga makita natong illustration nga duha lang ka branch ang mo-split during speciation. But naay gitawag nilang adaptive radiation nga ang branch di ay pwede siya di lang siya duha. Okay, a speciation mo to kung dimension ganiha nga a species can result to 5 or 10 nga different species at the same time. Okay, so mo na gitawag natong adaptive radiation. Okay, so adaptive radiation is said to produce more species in an ecologically diverse environment than those counterpart species in less diverse in ecosystem. So meaning to say, tendency is that ang adaptive radiation will happen only in a more diverse nga environment. Okay, a more diverse nga environment. So this type of speciation is pinned to be one of the major reasons of biodiversity in nature. So makita nato nga sa nature, mao pud ni ang gi-emphasize ni Wallace. Okay, mao pud ni gi-emphasize ni Wallace nga each climate kay sa Southeast Asia to si Wallace, specifically sa Indonesia and sa Papua New Guinea. Okay, according to Wallace nga each locality na siya own set of organisms with distinctions. Okay, so mo na ang gidudahan nila to is what Wallace emphasized or what he meant was the adaptive radiation as what we understand it today. Okay, so kana siya. Okay, so biogeography. So Alfred Russel Wallace, considered to be the father of biogeography. Remember that he independently theorized natural selection, the origin of species, at the same time with that of Charles Darwin, though Darwin gets most of the credit. So this is just a sad story for Alfred Russel Wallace because as what I've mentioned sa katong I think that was topic number 1, that Darwin is the family name Darwin is already known in science because his grandfather is already a known naturalist. Okay? So muna kang Darwin. And then kwartahan po nislang Charles Darwin compared sa kang Wallace. Si Wallace, on the other hand, wala siya lineage of kanang sa mga naturalist, and at the same time he has to work first before he can fund his own kanang gitawag nato nga expeditions. Ang katukang Darwin kay funded man to sa government nila sa United Kingdom. Ang kang Wallace is he funded his own nga expeditions. Okay, so mo na nga Darwin gets most of the credit. Okay, however mato kong mention ganiha nga they independently, take note ha, independent, they do not know each other, but they arrive with the same conclusion. So others thought, okay, that Darwin was more successful because he was wealthier and his family already have strong scientific connections in Europe. Okay, man akong mention. So Wallace described biogeography the Malay Archipelago. So so what is biogeography? Biogeography can be defined as a study of different biodiversity with respect to its geographical distribution. So this discipline considers life forms based on the elevation. Okay, so napanay ko an elevation, humidity, kana siya. So mana nga kato akong gi-mention ganiha nga every in Wallace's nga observation nakita niya nga in every geographical distribution naagi mga distinct nga mga species nga iyang makita. Okay, so mo to nga niingon siya nga the geography itself has something to do with the diversity of the organisms. Okay, so mo na iyang gitawag og biogeography. In fact, Darwin also described biogeography, okay, sa iyang book. Okay, especially sa katubitang tortoise. Okay, so biogeography ang po to ang gi-describe ni Darwin. So according to Darwin, sa iyang observation, ang different islands of the Galapagos with nga naay tortoise show nga ang carapace kanang mitong buko-buko sa kanang luyo sa kanang shell sa tortoises nga na siya ay different patterns. Okay, so different islands show nga different patterns ang makita nimo sa tortoises. That is biogeography. So Darwin also described biogeography, but siguro kay lain po siguro kaayo, I don't know ha ko alam ni siya. siguro lain po kay paminawon nga wa na lang yun nato i-credit kang Wallace. So Wallace was given the credit to to have fathered the study of biogeography. So Wallace developed his theory of natural selection on the foundation of biogeography. If Darwin has Galapagos, Wallace has the Malay archipelago, particularly Indonesia. Walang gyud nakakuan, walang gyud nakaabot si Wallace sa Mindanao. Okay? So wa siya kaabot og Pilipinas si Wallace. And nindot nung tatong nakatamak si Wallace sa Mindanao, particularly sa katong bitang sa Mount Apo nga site. Okay, because it's one of the most diverse nga kaning site dinhi sa Pilipinas, ang Mount Apo range. Okay? Samot na akong niadbot siya sa Sierra Madre. Ang Sierra Madre is isa sa pinaka diverse, or sa Palawan baka, di ba? O kana siya. So in Wallace's analysis of biogeography, he noted that characters of species seem to have borders where there seem to be contrasting characteristics even with closely related species when you cross this imaginary line. So today, this is known as the Wallace line. So this is Alfred Russel Wallace. Okay, so mo ni ang iyahang description. Okay, so makita ninyo din ang Wallace line. So sa Wallace line is makita niya ang distinction from one species to the other. Even closely related species makita niya ang distinction nga na invisible barrier, di ba? Katong gitawag natong isolation sa speciation. Okay? So according to Wallace nga na ay seemingly invisible barrier. Okay? So kana. So biogeography, say for example sa camel. Okay, they are of the same camel but they have different distributions. Therefore, they exhibited kaning different character traits. Okay? Yung similarity. So you can still think of a lot of things or a lot of example sa kaning gitawag natong biogeography. Okay? So another here according to evolutionists that can support evolution is kaning molecular biology. Di ba? Katong sa neo-Darwinism. So mo na lastly, evolutionists argue that the main evidence of evolution lies in the DNA itself, because remember kato atong gi-mention ganiha nga ang katong cell, di ba, na siya genetic content. Okay, katong ancestral cell. Okay, so as it speciate into a new cell, and then this new cell speciate into further into different organism, naagyon siya traces of the original nga kanang ancestor in terms sa ihang genetics. Okay, so na siya traces. So according to evolutionists, that we can use these traces to establish the phylogeny of the different species on Earth. Okay, so the more ka nga parehas mo og genetic content or genetic sequence, so it can be that you are of the same or you are closely related. Diba katong gitawag natong homology, only that ang homology is nga ato ang kasagaran nga ma-refer is katong sa morphology nga component. Okay, on the other hand, we can also apply the principle of homology sa genetics, particularly in molecular genetics. Okay, since all species come from the same ancestor, it is presumed that similarities in the sequence of the DNA can be detected. And molecular systematics is the discipline that analyzes this genetic similarity among species. So in molecular systematics, the more DNA sequences that are familiar, the closer is the evolutionary relationship between species. So kana siya. So this is just an example. So ang kaning gitawag nato nga genetic sequence, so kung iran na siya sa different softwares, man akong gi-mention different softwares, then you can create a phylogenetic tree. Okay, you can create a phylogenetic tree which establishes the similarities of different organisms and of course the different groups. Okay, so kana siya. Oy, manaman din eh. Okay, so that's actually this is actually the end of our lecture. Okay, so that's almost 1 hour. Okay, so kato siya. So that ends our lecture for this afternoon. So that's the arguments for evolution. So if you go to other nga mga references, okay, so you can you can encounter lots and lots of other arguments for evolution. So if you are more inclined to evolution, then no problem with that. Okay, so kana siya. So that ends our topic number 3, and at the same time dinhi rataman ang ato ang midterm. Okay, so topics 4, 5, and 6 will be dedicated now for the final term. Okay, so I hope you have learned something this afternoon. So hope to see you again and study hard. Okay, so we and prepare for an examination. Okay, so that's all. Take care and enjoy your day.